Welcome to the Seniors Flourish podcast, where it's all about helping occupational therapy practitioners working with older adults be the best they can be. And now your host, Mandy Chamberlain.
Hi guys, welcome to the Seniors Flourish podcast. My name is Mandy Chamberlain and I'm an occupational therapist. And on this show, I like to talk about everything about occupational therapy and working with the older adult. So I'm very happy you are here. This month, we're getting a little crazy because I have turned this podcast over to the experts. Cindy Kraft and Dee Cornetti from Cornetti and Kraft Healthcare Solutions are here to continue with the ultimate guide to simplifying your documentation. They're going to give you some principles to help make your documentation simple yet effective, which is what we're always looking for. Why make it more complicated than it needs to be? So the first episode in this series, they talked all about the subjective portion of documentation. Then last week, they talked about the objective portion of documentation. And this week, we are talking about the assessment portion of documentation. So make sure you check out those other two episodes, even though it's not necessary to get some awesome information and helpful things that you can use right away in your clinic. So today we are going to, like I said, talk with Cornetti and Kraft, talking about that assessment part. And if you don't know who Cornetti and Kraft are and why they are the perfect duo to be talking about this subject with you, let me give you a little bit of background. They are Cornetti and Kraft Healthcare Solutions, and they have over 70 years of clinical management and ownership experience. They are a healthcare consulting company with proven expertise in interdisciplinary patient-centered care management to fortify your agency's fiscal security. So with personal and professional accountability, leadership, fiscal responsibility, integrity, evidence-based clinical practice strategies, and regulatory expertise, which is huge, they are committed to an individualized customer experience, and they build solutions that fit your needs. Their goal is to ensure therapy remains an integral component of the medical home model through an ever-changing healthcare paradigm. And they accomplish this through education, consultation, and interfacing with regulatory bodies and payer sources to provide our clients mentoring, teaching, training, tools, and management resources. So, like I said, they are the people to be talking to you about this subject. That's why I handed it over to the experts. So what I would love for you to do is make sure you stick around towards the end of the episode to see how you can be a part of this special live Q&A webinar that Cindy Kraft and Dee Cornetti are going to be holding on July 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So you just need to sign up and join the webinar, and then they are going to be answering your documentation questions for 1 hour. So we're hopefully going to get as many as we can in that time period. I'm going to be there. I want to learn as much as I can. So make sure you listen till the end of the episode so I can give you all the links and all the information and how you can get signed up. But for now, just relax, enjoy, and learn all about the assessment portion of documentation with Cindy Kraft and Dee Cornetti.
Hi, I'm Dee Cornetti.
And I'm Cindy Kraft.
And we're back. Cindy, we're back to talk about the ultimate guide to simplifying your documentation. And God knows both you and I have been in a lot of documentation, especially recently. You know, we deal with it on a daily basis in our day jobs. And so, I'd like to say I've seen a lot of good, but it seems that there's a fair amount of bad and ugly. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, as much as you love coding, I'm pretty sure we are soon to qualify for some sort of, code that would demonstrate our auditing psychosis.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the assessment piece of the home health therapy note, if you will, or even the home health note doesn't just have to be for therapists. And keeping with our flow here, if you will, there's typically 2 or 3 key problems that start to show up consistently, regardless of the geographic region, regardless of the agency, regardless of the discipline. What's one of them, Cindy?
Well, it's ironic that it's very similar for those of you who listen to our discussion about subjective. I think one of the things we see the most of is nothing. We tend to see, okay, I need to put some subjective information in there, so there'll be the no complaints or something along those lines. And then, well, there should be objective information. So maybe there's a test or measure if it's appropriate for that patient. There might be some reference to manual muscle testing or how much assistance they need to do something. And then after those two virtual boxes essentially are checked, then it's straight to a plan. This is what we're going to do. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. What happened to the assessment piece of that? Well, it's called an assessment visit, yes, but there's a huge opportunity. I would argue at times the A portion of the SOAP format is our greatest opportunity to show skill, to really own. I'm not going because I have an order. I'm not going because, I had nothing better to do today than work with this individual patient. I'm here for a very specific reason, and I'm going to tell you how I came to that decision. I came to it by analyzing information. I need to analyze both the subjective and the objective. And here again, Dee, like we talked about with subjective, I think a lot of it is we do stuff on autopilot. We've been at this for a long time. Yes, okay, we get information and we move on to, okay, this is what I'm going to have to do with this individual patient. And we don't take a moment to realize that we need to put pen to paper, as it were, click on the keys to articulate what is my opinion about this? What weight do I give this information? It's not enough just to collect it and say, oh, look at me, I got this. Because realistically, you and I both know, it doesn't take a physical therapy education or occupational therapy or speech-language pathology educational program for us to be able to ask patients questions about how they're doing. Anybody could collect subjective. And the majority of the objective information we get, again, doesn't require a specific licensure to administer these tests or collect this information. So we tend to get a little delusioned that if I put down these words on my form, then isn't this magically skilled care? And actually, if we don't add the assessment piece to it, it's not, because most of what we collected, other than a few fancy terminology we've come up with along the way, could be done by other people. You could have called the daughter and she could have said, he's not doing that great today and he can't get out of the chair by himself. We may reframe it in he needs minimal assistance to get out of the chair, but that still doesn't speak to our skill.
Okay, Cindy, so I got to take you down this road. What about these massive descriptions in the assessment? Like we do something with gait, we call it hobbling, or, we get away from our terminology. Or on the counter, on the other side, flip the coin, we have a bunch of numbers, a tug of 27 and a berg of, 32 and a distance of, 17 and, you know what I mean? And a manual muscle test strength of 3- for, all appendages. What's wrong with just kind of summarizing that stuff? Why can't we just call that our assessment?
Well, you hit on a key piece, Dee, which I think some people resent the assessment area of a note, feeling like they're repeating themselves. They are putting down numbers again and distances again and assistance again and tests again. And whenever I see that, I'm like, wow, you wasted a lot of time on a misunderstanding. You already collected that information. It's other places in the note. Assessment is not intended for you to repeat all this stuff. It's for you to analyze those things. So when we see the patient's Tonetti was a 19, and that's the end of the conversation. It's like, and a 19 means what? Well, obviously, if you're a therapist, okay, wait a minute. We're also not trying to write to say I have to, we've heard this phrase, I'm not going to dumb it down for people who aren't therapists. This is not what we're talking about. What does a 19 mean? Well, you could look at the scoring guide for your particular tool and say, here, this is what it means based on the research. That's great. But what does it mean to this patient? I mean, I don't think the patient is really sitting there going, oh, I'm so glad Dee came today. Dee, did you know my Tonetti was 19? I mean, I have had tremendous angst about my 19, and I would really like to get it to another number, so please tell me that the reason you're here is to boost my Tonetti score. It's like, wait a minute. That's kind of what we're portraying when we document like this. The reality is, you showed up and I said, Dee, I'm afraid I'm going to fall on my head, or I've fallen 3 times in the last week. Your job then is to figure out why. So you're going to collect the information, more information from me about what happened around my falling or what you're finding from objective data could be contributing to it. But then you got to pull that together and say, the magic that is you, and I've heard you use that phrase more than once. So magical deepness is in taking those pieces and saying, I can tell you what this means and what it means for you. So I think what happens when it comes to the analyzing of information piece is we go down this yet again. Somebody says I got to put something there, so I put something there. And you and I both go, why did you bother? We need to really refocus this. My job is not to say something I already said, but to say this is what it means. This is what it means in terms of a test result. This is what it means in relation to this patient's function. That's what makes us a therapist. That is what says, wait a minute, that took training, that took expertise, that took a lot of work to be able to notice that connection and make that connection clearly in our documentation.
Well, Cindy, there is other language that's used in the assessment, and it's almost like pick your phrase of choice, I mean, after all that stuff is done in subjective and objective, why can't a therapist just put patient is appropriate for therapy, or patient is advancing towards goals, or patient is tolerating well? What's wrong with that? I mean, that's my assessment.
Well, I'm pretty sure at least one person cringed when you said tolerated well, and many folks will say, I can't even believe you said that, because that's
hard
old
to get out.
school. Right. Well, but more so in terms of that's got to be dead. I mean, we've had that conversation for years that tolerated well was insufficient. It has got to have gone the way of the dodo bird. I bet you never see it in documentation. Oh my gosh, I hope to live long enough that that's true. It is still quite a pervasive default response when the word assessment is there in the note to turn around and say tolerated well, or to put some variant on it like tolerated fairly well, as if, well, okay, he didn't even make it to well. He was close to well, D, but he just didn't make it. He was fairly well. Or we see folks that say, okay, I know, not supposed to use those words. So I'll come up with a completely different phrase like patient progressing toward goals. And then I'll use that over and over and over and over and over. Oh, my word. It's like these placeholders of I'm not going to leave it physically blank because someone will notice that there's nothing in there, so I'm just going to put an obligatory thing to fill it. Again, what a waste of time. Why would I put down patient tolerated well? I mean, you might as well just put, hey, they didn't die on the visit. I guess what I did didn't kill them. I mean, that's the usefulness of that kind of information. Because, yes, there's the analyzing piece of looking at the information you've collected, but there's another piece that says, give us your opinion. And you and I have talked about this. I find it hysterical that therapists have the reputation of being some of the most opinionated people on planet Earth, but then you start talking about putting an opinion in a note, and we look like we're going to hyperventilate. Like, oh my gosh, we can't do that. That's not what Medicare wants to see. Really? Because if we think about what we're actually getting paid for, we're getting paid for our opinion. And it's not an opinion that comes because we slept on a Holiday Inn last night and decided we have some thoughts about how this patient functions. This is coming from experience. And so what if we thought about it and said, if that area contained a portion that started with a phrase, and you hinted at it a little bit, in the professional opinion of this therapist, or physical therapy should be provided because, or in the opinion of this occupational therapist, and then we finish that phrase. Now, no one is saying, oh, good, we just got the magic bullet from Cornetti and Kraft. I'm going to write in my professional opinion on every note for the rest of my born days. Please, please don't make it a cut and paste issue. It's a mental issue that says, what is my opinion about this? So why do I think therapy should be provided to this patient when it's an initial assessment situation? But also on routine visits, why do I think, I tend to look at it this way, Dee. When we do a visit with a patient, a follow-up type visit, at the end of that visit, we feel it was either a good visit, a successful visit, or a less than successful visit. Well, what is that based on? Not a mood or not fairly well. It is when things have worked well, I can tell you why they worked well. This was going better, the daughter was here, whatever those reasons are that made us go, this was a successful visit, is an assessment. When the patient visit does not go as well, if something happened, it's almost like we're afraid to put down things that we feel are negative. But if the patient visit didn't go as well, there's a reason. What happened? I mean, we both had that experience where a patient's beloved pet passes away. And the visit or the next few visits, or even if they start canceling visits, that is part of the reason. But that speaks to These are real people with real issues, and there are times where other things happen that are maybe not even medical things that are going to impact how well this plan of care is going, and that I need to make adjustments and accommodate those things and address those things, which takes the skill of my particular discipline, which is way more encompassing than tolerated fairly well.
Yeah, and just to throw it aside for sometimes the way I cue therapists to say, here's what we're looking for, here is a good assessment piece, is to think about if the patient or the family member or even the nurse at the clinic, you had to do an oral report. Tell me about your visit, or how's mom doing, or how am I doing with therapy? Answering that question. That's a great way to say, if you can answer that question in your assessment, whether it be on an evaluation, whether it could be on a reassessment or a regular visit note. If you answer that question as if a family member of the patient was asking you, then you probably have some good information in that part of the note. So, any further thoughts?
I think the key piece is, Dee, our opinion matters. And we need to value it enough to put it into the documentation in a way that does answer that question, why was I here, what did I see, and what am I really going to use ultimately for our next conversation where we talk about plan and goals. My assessment needs to bridge the data to the plan. If there's no bridge, it just looks like I collected some stuff and I'm going to do some stuff. Oh, whoopee. And it doesn't necessarily speak to an individual discipline skill set.
Yeah, well, you are teeing me up good, Cindy Kraft, so we'll be talking soon. Hey, thanks y'all for listening. Peace out.
Okay, guys, there you have it. I hope you appreciated and enjoyed Cindy and Dee talking all about the assessment portion of documentation. I know I found it super helpful, and they just have that personality to make it really real and, really have it relatable, that those are the things that we're having problems with in our day-to-day clinical practice. And as always, they're super entertaining. So as I was talking about earlier, the live interactive webinar that you can be a part of with Cindy and Dee, they are going to be answering your questions. Anything you want to know about documentation, management, regulations, all those burning questions that you always just don't feel like you have the answer to, they will be yours for 1 full hour to answer as many questions as we can. So all you have to do is head over to seniorsflourish.com/live and sign up there. The webinar is going to be July 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be great. I'm really excited just to be a part of it. I'm going to be there to listen and get my questions answered as well. Or hopefully, if there's time for mine as well. But while you're over there signing up for the webinar, make sure you sign up and get the free skilled terminology quick reference guide. It has key phrases on there for billing and reimbursement. It's just a PDF that you can print off. It's something I put together that I have used in the past to just make sure that all my verbiage is skilled. So have a great week. I can't wait for you to tune in next week when we are going to be talking about the plan portion of documentation. We're really just wanting to make sure that we're documenting and figuring out what data what actually matters for our patients and for our payers.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Senior Rehab Project at seniorrehabproject.com.